Mr. McIver, would you like to share your time with the minister?
Yeah, how much time do I have, please, Mr. Chair?
Well, you'll have 20 minutes.
Yeah, if it's okay with the good minister, I'll share time.
Yeah, please proceed.
So, Minister, thank you for being here today to answer our questions. I appreciate that. Now, in the first part, my honourable colleague was asking you questions. You said you wanted to modernize the labour code because it hasn't been, I think your words are modernized or changed since 1988. Is that correct?
So we had talked about significant reviews and updates since 1988.
Right. Okay. So you want to modernize it now. And I think you told my colleague that you want to modernize it based on the 8 fundamental conventions of the International Labour Organization.
8 core.
Those two conversations were not connected.
Okay.
He was simply asking from the business plan. We included some language specific to making sure that Alberta is following international work conventions.
Yeah.
And so when asked the question about international conventions, I responded that the 8 ILO core conventions are those that the Government of Canada has chosen to adopt. Right. But it was not something that I spoke to as a cause or reason for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to make sure that we're following the 8 core conventions. Is that correct?
So Canada has made that commitment that we will.
But you haven't for Alberta?
Alberta has ratified that, yes.
So you have then?
Yes, we have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and those conventions are Freedom of Association and Protective of the Right to Organize Convention?
That is one.
Right to Organize and Collective Bargaining Convention, the Forced Labor Convention, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm reading it off a website that has them listed, Abolition of Forced Labor Convention, the Minimum Age Convention, and the Worst Form of Child Labor Convention, and Equal Remuneration Convention, and Discrimination in Employment and Occupation Convention. I think I got those right because I'm reading it off the website. So you disagree with any of that?
No, thank you for finding that.
Okay, well, it's the Google machine. It's not that hard. I just Googled it and up it popped right in front of my eyes. So in terms of what you're doing, and you talked about how old the current labor legislation is because it hasn't been updated significantly since 1988. And well, I don't disagree with these 8 fundamental conventions. The Forced Labor Convention is from 1930. Freedom of Association is 1948. The Right to Organize is 1949. The Abolition of Forced Labor is 1957. The Minimum Age Convention is 1973. Here's the newest one, the Worst Form of Child Labor Convention, 1999. Equal Remuneration Convention, 1951. And the Discrimination Convention from 1958. So I guess I'm just looking for you to square that when you talk about how the 1988 legislation is old and yet you're basing what you want to do on things that are good. I agree that they're good, but go as far back as 1930. So when you're grasping onto things as old as 1930, how does that make something done in 1988 old?
Okay, so Alberta's labour legislation, having not been updated since 1988, while our neighbouring jurisdictions have been doing updates, has led to things like in our employment standards legislation, similarly 1988, we do not have access to job-protected sick leaves, which our other neighbouring jurisdictions do. As well, the employment insurance compassionate care benefits, we are out of line with those benefits.
So, but do any of these conventions include that?
The items I'm talking about are the conversation that I want to have with Albertans about the legislation modern and working for their needs. And that's why we've initiated a consultation.
No, I appreciate that, but you also said you're hanging your hat on 8 things that are no newer than 1999 and some of them as old as 1930.
No, again, Mr. McIver, I think there's been a bit of a line cross. The previous member was asking me about some lines in the business plan that spoke to making sure we were in line with international conventions. Right. And in that context, I spoke of our 8 core conventions within the ILO.
No, I heard you very well, very clearly. So in the current labor code that you're going to change after you do your consultation. Does the current labor code fall short of any of those 8 international labor conventions?
So we need to make some adjustments.
So we will need to make some adjustments around youth employment in order for Alberta to continue to ratify that core component around youth employment. So there is a disconnect currently between Alberta's legislation and that ILO convention.
Right. Okay. And that was there when I was labor minister as well, and we had talked about that back then and about making changes to that. But is that the only one that you're aware of?
Relating to the 8 core conventions, I believe the right to collectively bargain was out of line prior to us implementing the essential services legislation, which returned the right to strike to public sector employees.
But today it's in line.
I'm just going to double check and make sure I'm not missing anything. Did you want to answer this?
Sure.
I'll have my Deputy Minister, Jeff Parr, speak to this.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm a bit reluctant to wade into the middle of all this because we're...
Well, that's what we're here for, is to wade in.
So I'm wading in. So it's really only been in about the last 10 or 15 years that Canada's moved forward to ratify these international conventions. They've been sitting on the books for a number of years. The difficulty that Canada was having in the ratification is that it's not a unitary state, so it wasn't in a position to make a decision on behalf of all the provinces. It needed all of the provinces to agree. And it's really only, as I said, in about the last 10 or 15 years, the provinces have been moving forward, reviewing their legislation, making sure that it does come in line with the international conventions. So clearly, conventions around forced labor and those sorts of things, those are ones that were dealt with quite some time ago. Canada does very well in the international forum in terms of how our labor legislation stacks up. But there are, so within that, these are sort of benchmarks we watch as we're moving through. Around the right to free collective bargaining, there'd be provisions with respect to the ability of workers to make their decisions about joining unions without interference from employers or from government. And so those would be some of the types of things we need to look at. What's the fair balance about getting there? The minister mentioned youth employment, for example. So you're right. That's something that had been reviewed in the past, and we're sort of moving our way forward to look at those sorts of things. And so I think the other thing to point out here is the Comprehensive European Trade Agreement actually compels Canada to make sure they've ratified those and we're in compliance with those. So while we're not specifically, looking at those things, when we need to line up with all of those, those are pressures that we have in Canada as we review our legislation across the country, so it's a variable. The other piece we are looking at is where the rest of the country stacks up with respect to employment standards, labor relations, health and safety as well.
Good, thank you. Okay, so Chair, moving on. I think the minister talked about one of the reasons she wants to make this change is for a work-life balance. Is that? You wanted to talk about things like work. Is that correct, Minister?
Yes. When we talk about family-friendly workplaces and just what has changed in the nature of work over the past few decades, work-life balance is something that I'm hearing from stakeholders.
Okay. So in your view or your government's view, is work-life balance a government choice or a personal choice that people make?
So I'm certainly interested in talking to Albertans about how they would want labor legislation to support their understanding of family-friendly workplaces and work-life balance, and that's why we are engaging Albertans in a consultation.
Okay. On the you talked about the labor stats working with. Are you still keeping all the labor stats now that you kept when you became government in 2015? And I ask this so I'm not sandbagging you here, because I can tell you that you've got, and I want to compliment you, you've got amazing staff in the labor department. Many of the people I worked with before and the ones in the front row, top notch.
Yes. Top notch.
One of the great pieces of work they did, and I was always proud, as I hope you still are when you visit with other ministers, is that everybody always said Alberta has the best stats. So I'm checking in. Are you still keeping all those stats that were being kept when you started?
Absolutely. So Alberta's labor market information and the analysis we are able to do on Stats Canada data, as well as proactive investigation, continues and is important work of the the ministry, it results in the public reports and updates that we provide to Albertans.
Just want to know you haven't dropped any of that. So Minister, you used the phrase along the way several times, our minister's partners that we're talking to. I think you used that phrase. So who are your ministry partners?
So there were a couple of contexts in which I used the term partners. We have our other ministries considered as partners, and then I referred to our stakeholders as partners.
Okay, so who are your stakeholders, please, then? I want you to be comfortable with the question you're answering.
The workers of Alberta.
Okay.
Employers within Alberta.
Okay. And how many employers have you talked to?
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give you a number because I speak directly to employers as well as to employer representing organizations that represent thousands of employers.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I can quantify that.
You don't know how many workers and employers you've talked to. Okay. You did talk about on with the previous questioner about WCB, and you made a statement, and I'm going to quote you as close as I can. I think you said it's important to measure the number of WCB inspections that we do. I think you said that. So since it's important to measure it, how many WCB inspections do you do?
So what we're talking about there is the occupational health and safety inspections. And you can see that on business plan page 108, 1.E.
Yep.
So that is the number of occupational health and safety inspections. In last year,
Can you say the number out loud, if you don't mind?
9,151.
9,151. Okay. And is that higher or lower than what was done before?
I'll just quickly double check. That is a decrease of 5% to the prior year. Okay,
so you'll understand why I'm asking, because one of the things you said is that there wasn't enough inspections done, and the number you're doing is falling. So are you going to correct that this year if that's too low?
So we've set a target for ourselves for 2017-18 of 10,500 inspections. Mm-hmm. So we are working to increase the number of inspections, both proactive and reactive. Okay. And putting the systems in place to accomplish that.
Okay. And thank you. So the Labor Relations Code review. Do you have information on the reviews that your estimates will start or sustain? Like, do you have a list of reviews that you want to do in the 2017-2018 year?
So we are currently engaging in the Employment Standards, Labor Relations Code, and Workers' Compensation reviews. Those are actively ongoing. I'm also interested in discussing with Albertans the Occupational Health and Safety Code, but timelines and process for that has not yet been discussed.
Okay, so you don't really know which ones you're going to do. You only really named one.
So within Alberta's labor environment, workplace legislation, there's 4 foundational pieces. Yep. We're currently reviewing 3, and the last one I intend to look at.
Well, just tell me what the last one is you're not doing then. Maybe I can figure the rest out from that.
Occupational health and safety.
Occupational health and safety is a no. Everything else is a yes. Okay. All right. I got to the answer. Thank you, Minister. Now, Minister, I tabled in the House the other day. I hope you noticed, but maybe you didn't because it's easy to miss these things. This document here, it's the Principles of Administrative Law, Joins de Villers, 5th edition, and it's done by a WCB advocate in Calgary. And the reason why I draw it to your attention, Minister, is that there's 30 recommendations in it for WCB. That's why I'm recommending it to your reading pleasure and your thoughtful consideration as minister. Can you commit to me that you yourself will do it, or have your department look through that and consider the value of those recommendations?
So I'll certainly commit to making sure that it has been reviewed. My quick question would be...
You can't read everything, Minister.
My apologies. I want to try to get us back on track with the budget estimates at hand here as well.
This is exactly where I am. So the Minister was just about to give me an answer, Chair.
So my quick question you might be able to help me with is, do you know if this person in this document had been submitted to the WCB panel to be part of the larger review process?
You know what? I can't answer that. I don't know that.
So I hope it has been, because we certainly were asking for that type of exact input. I will follow up to find out if the panel has already reviewed it, and if not,
just want to redirect us back towards the budget.
Mr. Chair, the minister's only one person. I wouldn't possibly insist she read everything that comes past her office, but she has staff that can certainly do that and advise her on it.
I understand that. I just want to get us back on track with the budget estimate.
We've been on track since the beginning, and I'll continue to be on track. So, Minister, with the labor code review, do you know how many people you intend to consult before you make a decision? Any number of businesses and number of workers?
So as part of the consultation, we are inviting all Albertans to submit their feedback online. And so putting a number on that, I'm not able to do.
Yeah, but I mean directly. I mean, who are you going to go out? Certainly you're going to do some outreach and call people. I mean, and again, you're only one person, so presumably you'll have some of your staff do that, which is fair.
Yeah.
How many employers do you intend to reach out to in the process?
Similar to your first question, because we're engaging in employers as well as representative agencies, I'm not able to put a number on how many employers will be engaged.
Can you name any individuals or groups you've reached out to?
Yes. So the Canadian Industrial Relations Association, I've personally met with Newman Thompson, CIRA Calgary, CLAC, the Alberta Building Trades Council, the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, Progressive Contractors Association, and I'll stop there because you asked me to name any.
No, and they're all good choices for you to make. So I appreciate you doing all of those things, Minister. Thank you for that. Minister, a lot of people have said that 6 weeks isn't sufficient time. Will you consider extending that period of time beyond such a labor legislation that touches every Albertan that works? And if you consider everybody Albertan that works, that's most Albertans.
So I believe 6 weeks is an appropriate amount of time, and that the review process we've set out, as well as the focus that we are putting on specific areas that we are talking to Albertans about, will allow us to be able to engage fully and get some good feedback.
Okay, so in order to fit everybody in 6 weeks, you can't stand on a stump and yell and expect people to hear you. And I know you didn't say you would do that, so I'm not accusing you of that. My point is, you must have. What's your advertising budget so that Albertans will know about this consultation, so that they can include themselves in it?
Thank you for that question.
Thanks for the 2-minute warning, Chair. Appreciate it.
So we have been posting through the Alberta websites and engaging our stakeholders so that they can be reaching out to their members to let them know about the review, as well as contacting people through our own contact lists. In this case, I don't know if we have a budget for advertising per se. So.
Good. Well, if you could get that, if you could get that to me later, I'd be grateful for that, Minister. I think I'm down to a minute and a half here, and I'm trying not to waste your time or mine here. So, the evaluation framework for testing your consultation, have you worked that out, or is that going to happen afterwards?
So you're asking about how do we evaluate the consultation and its success?
Is there a matrix you're going to use to evaluate the input you get on the labor consultation?
So we'll be doing any evaluations after the fact.
Okay, do you have a matrix worked out that you're going to use for that? And is it available publicly to look at?
So we do not have a matrix to evaluate the consultation prepared.
Okay, and what role will the government's vaunted climate change plan have in your consultations and the labor code changes?
Tangential relationship.
Okay. And have you consulted with or heard from, actually I'll ask it this way first, have you consulted directly with Alberta's Indigenous communities on the labor consultation?
Yes, we have.
You have, okay. And can I ask how many Indigenous communities?
we will have to follow up with you.
Okay. Now, how much of the input you get are you going to release for the public to see so that they can look over your shoulder, if you will, because you and I will all work for Albertans and decide how well you've listened on the consultation?
My apologies to interrupt. The time allotted has concluded. We'll now move on to independent members and other parties. Mr. Clark, would you like to share your time with the Minister?
I would like to go back and forth. Yes, please. Thank you very much.